guia de estilo e instruções para a síntese de fala. Este é o início da mensagem. Comece com energia total e um tom de comando, capturando a atenção imediatamente. TikTok, suburbano backyard, 11h47 p.m. Um account creditado apenas como The Neighbor, pans de um dogo sônio toward the fence. A câmera é breathy, handheld. A porch light throws a cone into the yard. The uploader says, "You see that?" em uma hushed voice. For 3 beats, the frame is ordinary. The dog circles, insects blink in the air. Then, just beyond the pickets, a shape stands, tall, still, a pale oval where a face should be. It doesn't step, it doesn't move like a person. The dog tilts its head and whines. The clip is short enough that you question your perception. Is it a person in a reflective jacket, a trick of the lens catching the neighbor's motion? Observers pointed out the fence's gap aligning with a street lamp. Others noted the figure's proportions don't match a human. The uploader reports calling the neighbor the next day. Nobody admits to standing there. The dog refuses to sleep on that porch for 2 weeks. Soft invite, tell us, reflective jacket, elaborate prank, or something else entirely. Reddit, campsite by a lake, uploader Lone Hiker 99, time-stamped around dusk. The camera sits propped on a cooler. 3 friends laugh about a bad joke while a small campfire hisses. One voice off camera says, "Did you hear that?" A thin metallic clack, like a hinge, echoes from the tree line. In the recording's quiet, an orb of light appears between trunks. Not a headlamp, not the steady beam of a flashlight, but a quick, round glow drifting like a mote. It moves closer, pausing as if peeking around a birch. "Oh, cute little firefly," someone jokes. Then the sound changes, an exhale, too long to be a human breath caught by wind. The orb flares, then the cooler camera jerks as if brushed. The uploader runs toward the noise. Footage ends with the crunch of dead leaves and a panicked shout, "Where did it go?" The comment section divides into practical explanations, insect reflection, lens flare, and people who dizem que os seus pets sensem o thing before humans do. Aftermath. They packed up the next morning. One friend swears something touched their shoulder. Another swears they saw footprints in mud that faded into nothing. A camper later posts a grainy follow-up with no light, only deeper silence. Invitation. If you camp in the woods, has anything like this ever brushed past your camp? YouTube short, familiar bathroom, late evening. A mother films her toddler in the tub, bubbles and rubber ducks visible in the frame. The child giggles, the clip feels domestic and warm, until the reflection in the bathroom mirror splits in a way the room does not. In the glass, behind the tiled shelf, a second silhouette steps into view. A narrow, childlike outline that mirrors the toddler's small wave, though nobody is actually standing behind the tub. The uploader's caption reads, "My kid didn't notice. I'm frozen." Quoted excerpt from uploader, "It just wasn't there when I turned around." The mosaic of tile distorts features, making any claim risky, but the reflection's timing is uncanny. It duplicates gestures fractionally delayed, as if watching through a lag. Comments speculate mirror condensation, double exposure from a screen, or a prank with a second phone positioned elsewhere. The mother says she unplugged a smart mirror she doesn't own and covered that bathroom for a week with towels, and no one entered alone. Aftermath. She booked a plumber to check wiring and a friend to sleep over. The family later installed a different mirror and tried a staged shot that did not reproduce the effect. Soft invite.
What would you do if a reflection mimicked your child? Instagram Reels. A narrow alley behind an urban cafe at 3:12 a.m. Uploader labeled Delivery Guy. The clip opens on the back of a delivery bicycle, its taillight a red dot. Something disturbs the chain of streetlights, one by one dimming in rhythm. In the distance, an outline crouches low by a graffiti-scarred wall, blinking small white eyes toward the camera. The uploader whispers, "Nope," and backs away. The camera breathes with his steps. Observation. City lights fail in a pattern impossible to attribute to a single blown fuse. Neighbors later report a localized outage in adjacent blocks. Several commenters point to faulty streetlight wiring or an animal nesting in the pole. Others mention that the outline's gait wasn't animal-like. It had small, quick head tilts. Aftermath. The delivery driver filed an anonymous report. Local authorities logged a short power glitch and moved on. The uploader took a different route home for days. Invite. Urban watchers. Ever seen animals in alleys that seem to judge you more than flee? Each vignette keeps the credits sparse by design. Platform and uploader tag where available. Otherwise, an account or the neighbor. The voice carries a mix of curiosity and reserve. We describe what the camera records and what the witnesses say, but leave room for argument. Sometimes the physical evidence points one way. Sometimes it dissolves into grain, light, and memory. And in each case, pets, friends, or neighbors act as the first corroborators. A dog's growl, a friend's sudden silence, footprints that end at the tree line. The pattern begins to gather weight as the clips trade thresholds. A gate, a bathroom mirror, the edge of a campsite, a fence. Thresholds are small ruptures in ordinary space, a place you pass and do not expect to linger. When multiple clips center on the same fragile border, the uncanny clusters like frost around a window.
Guia de estilo e instruções para síntese de fala. Início das instruções. Você é um narrador palestrante com voz potente, forte e autoritária. O tom deve ser firme e inabalável. Contexto de continuidade. A frase anterior era "The uncanny clusters like frost around a window." Mantenha o ritmo e a força vocal sem quebrar a conexão. Haja como se estivesse transmitindo uma verdade fundamental. Fim das instruções. We keep ordering the clips to let tension rise. Small displacements lead to longer silences, and the last videos you haven't seen yet push toward unresolved consequences. One clip in particular that follows in tonight's lineup intensifies this accumulation. A rural driveway captured on a cheap Ring camera, a long frame that holds a slow, impossible sequence. The account, anonymous, captions it, "No explanation." The frame sits still for 5 minutes in the upload, a long, patient way to make viewers feel the length of a night. At 2:03 a.m., a shape folds out of a shadow and moves along the hedge like someone adjusting every branch only when the camera cannot catch the motion directly. The uploader's note in the caption reads, "Neighbors saw something too." The sound is a distant hum, then a soft metal scrap. No doors open, but the cars in the driveway show light glances as if something passed between them. Observers found no footprints, no camera tampering, and a neighbor later wrote in the thread that his sheepdog refused to approach the hedge for a week. Others argue for a reflection from a passing car's headlights or a person on stilts. The uploader says they've since replaced the camera with a more expensive model. That footage, they say, shows nothing unusual. Soft invite. Would you upgrade your security or accept the blank? Across all 8 encounters, the human detail matters most. Uploaders are not anonymous archetypes, they are people who signed on with fear and curiosity. A woman who films a basement door that slams on its own later explains she was a hospice nurse and not prone to melodrama. A college kid who posts an overnight dorm video apologizes in the comments for the shaky cam, not the content. Their credibility markers are small: phone calls to friends, attempts to replicate the phenomenon, neighbors corroborating sound, pets that refuse to enter rooms. These are the slivers that trickle into the larger question of what to believe. We weigh practical hypotheses alongside the uncanny. Pareidolia, the brain's habit of finding faces where none exist, explains some frames. Reflections off wet pavement and car windows explain others. Animals, especially in woods and alleys, often behave in ways we misread as deliberate. And, of course, hoaxes exist: staged lights, clever editing, accounts chasing views. Yet some clips resist tidy explanations because they collect multiple oddities: power fluctuations, animal behavior, repeated reports from nearby witnesses. And those multiplicities are what elevate an odd clip to something that keeps replaying in the head. There is also the social trace. Comment sections bloom into micro-communities. Skeptics supply weather data and lens diagrams. Believers point to the small consistencies that repeat across clips. A tendency for things to show themselves near thresholds, a propensity for animals to react first, a timing around sudden power dips. The commenters become a chorus that extends each scene beyond its original frame, and sometimes that communal attention is the only follow-up the uploader receives. We do not suggest trespassing, chasing shadowy shapes, or prying into other people's property. If footage implies dangerous places, riverbanks at night, unstable hatches, active line work, the responsible next step is to notify local authorities or professionals, not to improvise vigilante investigation. Several uploaders told us they called non-emergency lines after their experiences. That report is often the most concrete trail left behind. The tension is designed to peak. As the video sequence, the viewer accumulates unease. Objects move slightly out of order. Dogs stop barking mid-phrase. Mirrors reflect things that are not there. The last clip tonight, which closes the set, is the one that leans the hardest into incompleteness. Audio without source, lights without explanation, people who refuse follow-up. Before that final unsettling clip, there's a suburban power outage clip that ties a few threads together. An account labeled only by a first name uploads jerky footage taken during a neighborhood blackout. The camera captures a tree broken in two at its base, branches splayed like the ribs of something opened. In the distance, an upright object stands among fallen limbs, narrow, vertical, as if the wind had folded a person into the trunk and left them there. A neighbor recorded later that their generator failed just before the tree made the sound of tearing down. Speculation in the thread ranges from microburst to vandalism to something less named. No one claims responsibility for the broken tree. The city logs a brief outage with no definite source listed. The community collects around the fallen tree the next morning, but the upright object is gone. The lack of sequence, sound, sudden blackout, damage with an unaccounted object is the kind of knot that resists neat answers. Invite: does the missing explanation add to the fear or invite a rational search for detail? Finally, we close this set not with a claim, but with a checklist of possibilities and an appeal to the people who witness or record. Sometimes the most honest account is the one that names uncertainty.
reflections, wildlife, equipment error, hoax, or an event that genuinely bends what you expected and leaves you unable to name it. For every clip in this collection, we give you the footage, the uploader's short quote, an observation about sound and light, and whatever follow-up the uploader reports. We resist declaring a verdict because the material rarely supports one. If these clips intrigue you, subscribe and like so more compilations can surface. And if you have footage, send it in without trespassing or putting yourself in danger. We want first-hand angles, not risk.
Guia de estilo e instruções para síntese de fala. Início das instruções. Você é um narrador palestrante com voz potente, forte e autoritária. O tom deve ser firme e inabalável. Contexto de continuidade. A frase anterior era: In danger, we want first-hand angles, not risk. Você está no meio de uma frase-pensamento. Mantenha o ritmo e a força vocal sem quebrar a conexão. Haja como se estivesse transmitindo uma verdade fundamental. Share your best theory in the comments, natural, trick, or unexplainable. For now, the 8 clips stand as small recorded proofs of how thin the ordinary can feel when the frame shifts. A few weeks after the compilation posted, small ripples carried the images into other channels. A local reporter picked up the blackout tree and asked the utility company to check their outage logs. The company confirmed a brief surge at 2:16 a.m., but could not tie it to a cause beyond transient grid disturbance. A different uploader quietly deleted the mirror clip after a commenter found an old home repair forum thread showing the same glass patterning under specific indoor lighting, not a debunking so much as an iron law of optics that sometimes looks like a ghost. Others doubled down. The neighbor who texted, "Did you hear that crash?" agreed to speak on record. He described a sensation rather than a clear fact. A pressure wash of silence, then the violent tearing of wood, then the sudden absence of whatever had been there. He said he checked the yard at dawn and found only pollen on his shoes and the cratered earth where the tree stood. The upright thing, he told the reporter, wasn't there in the morning, and that made it worse. If something had been left, someone would have moved it. If something had been taken, who would take that and why? His words followed the clip into its second life, a small neighborhood both grieving and theorizing. A couple of uploaders were more pragmatic. One handed over raw files to a community-run group of amateur videographers who specialize in signal artifacts. They ran frame-by-frame analyses and annotated the clips, showing where camera shutters and codec compression created false continuity. Their report was sober. Some anomalies collapsed into technical explanations. Others, those punctuated by independent audio spikes and multiple witness statements, refused to be cataloged so neatly. The phenomenon, then, is co-authored. A clip is rarely a singular event. It is an artifact stitched to attention, to memory, to argument. In comment threads, a handful of voices began to do what institutions could not: hold the uneasy space between explanation and wonder. They cataloged what was known, what remained speculative, and where safety or ethics demanded silence. We close this chapter without a verdict because the materials still will not yield one. The most unsettling footage is stubbornly thin. A light that flickers in a dark corridor with no apparent bulb. Laughter captured on a porch camera when no one was there. A vertical shape standing among shattered branches that absent-mindedly disappears by dawn. These images do their work not by proving the supernatural, but by undermining the confidence of the ordinary. If you watch again, pay attention to the small hesitations, the way a dog lowers its head before a sound, the microsecond a reflection behaves like an absence. Those are the seams. They may hide tricks, or they may be the closest thing we have to proof that something keeps pressuring the edge of what we name sensible. For now, the footage sits in its folder and waits for the next hand to open it. In the weeks that followed, attention folded outward. Where the clips had once circulated in isolated threads, they began to intersect. A waveform from a porch camera matched the cadence of a church bell recorded in another county. A meteorologist noted a sudden temperature inversion the night of the blackout tree. A landscaping contractor remembered an unusual delivery truck idling near the lane that led to one of the yards. None of these connections proved a cause, but together they sketched a topology of coincidence. Places and moments where the frame tilted and people noticed. The local reporter kept pushing. He compiled timelines and asked for logs, and in asking, he taught a small ecology of asking to people who had not expected to be asked. The utility company sent lists and disclaimers. The county clerk produced a yellowed permit for tree removal on a nearby plot. A retired electrician sent an email with a drawing of how surges leap through old wiring. Where official answers were thin, oral memory thickened. The neighbor who had heard the crash gave a fuller account now, admitting to a detail he had left out before. A car with its hazards on idling at the end of the road the night before. He could not say why that had seemed irrelevant until someone else mentioned a phone call from a driver who thought the road out of town had been blocked by a downed limb. Amateur videographers kept answering the question they had set for themselves. What can be known from pixels? They built overlays, stacked frames, slowed footage until the artifacts were audible. The high whine of a compressor in the background, a pattern shimmer that repeated at intervals not tied to shutter speed. In one clip, a porch light swallowed its own filament and then resumed, as if embarrassed. In another, the dog did not bark until several frames after a sound. An odd delay that suggested more than a camera lag. The group labeled such anomalies meticulously, and their margins of uncertainty became a kind of craft. Here is where compression fails us. Here is where witness memory stretches. Here is where independent audio corroborates what our eyes hesitate to accept. Public interest shifted the private gravity of the clips. A house that had been ordinary now received visits from passers-by who stopped their cars to look. People left small offerings at curbs, flowers, a child's plastic figure, a candle in a jam jar. Anonymous gestures that made the scene feel less like a file and more like a place where something had happened. The homeowner accepted these tokens with an embarrassed politeness and then moved them to a box in the garage.
"We're trying to live," she told a reporter, and her voice carried the odd steadiness of someone negotiating a new definition of normal. She let the journalist take photographs on the condition that no shots would be taken of the family through their windows. Even as she spoke, she scrolled past comments on the original clip. Speculative metaphors, jokes, grief. One comment, a simple line, "My brother slept in the car that night," which opened another thread of testimonies about restless sleep, dreams of walking into voids, waking with the rug of memory frayed at the edges. Among the many hands that touched the material, one was patient in a way the rest were not. A woman who had previously posted an unrelated, meticulous archive of local weather patterns, radar sweeps, temperature logs, and the kind of annotated spreadsheets that make others' eyes glaze, began to collate the dates and times from the strange clips against atmospheric data. She noted an alignment. Several of the more stubborn anomalies lay near times when wind shear changed direction, or when a noctilucent layer thinned. Her commentary was dry but precise. "Correlation is not causation," she typed under an uploaded graph. then added, as if to herself, "But correlations are the raw material of questions." The town's religious leaders felt it too. At the end of a weekday service, a pastor mentioned the clips without sermonizing, an acknowledgement rather than prophecy. "We live in a world that keeps surprising us," he said. A small group formed from his congregation. Not a formal investigation, but a rotation of evenings where volunteers would stand vigil on porches with thermometers and notebooks, recording the world as if attendance might alter what unfolded. They were not looking for proof so much as bearing witness to the strangeness and the fear it unspooled. But not all attention was benign. A conspiracy blog republished a grainy clip with a caption promising the fuller truth, and its readership descended as if summoned. Private messages multiplied. One sender offered money for exclusive footage. Another threatened to sue if the uploader did not confirm the clip as staged. In response, some withdrew. Others made their raw files public for anyone to download and examine. Exposure for some became the safest shelter. If everyone could see the same frames, no single storyteller could claim dominion over the narrative. Among these movements, a different discovery shifted the tenor from neighborhood curiosity to the clinical edge of inquiry. The amateur group, those who annotated codecs and measured frame jitter, received an unexpected submission, a set of files recorded by a dashcam from 8 months earlier in a town 2 counties over. The image was low and the audio thin, but a vertical shape stood at the far edge of a field in the same rigid posture as the figure in the mirror clip. It did not move except for a slight tremor.
O uploader, who remained anonymous, offered nothing more than a location and a timestamp. The group ran their usual battery of tests. The compression artifacts did not line up with any known camera model in their database. The audio bore a low-frequency resonance that traced to no everyday machine the contributors could identify. Once the group posted their annotated comparison, commenters began to map other examples. Old trail camera snaps of deer that had not been there the night before. A grainy cell phone video where a porch light bent around nothing and left shadows that suggested negative space. Patterns coalesced the way frost forms on glass, not tidy but edging toward repetition. Some commentators cried fraud. Others spoke of a pattern recognition that was simply our humanness at work. Habits of meaning-making that could construe a coat rack as a being if enough attention gathered. It is important, in a situation like this, to note what remained unchanged. No one had captured sustained, incontrovertible motion. There were no long, clean shots that closed the loop. The verticals did not walk past the lens. They lingered and were gone. The audio spikes were blips, not extended transmissions. What the material did do, slowly, by aggregation, was change behavior. People began to test their own tools. Homeowners left lights on and measured current draw. Backyard watch teams compared timestamps. A student in the county college started a project to correlate nocturnal animal movement with camera anomalies. Cameras multiplied. Porches, attics, dashcams, doorbells, an ad hoc network stitched together by an unease that felt, to many, worth the labor. And then, toward the end of a damp morning when the town still smelled of drizzle and mown grass, the reporter got a voicemail. It was short and breathy, recorded on an answering machine someone had kept precisely for its old-world reliability. The voice was near-whispered, close enough to be intimate. "We always thought it was wind. We thought it was a truck. But last night the air hummed, and the kitchen clock stopped.
I went to the window, and there was a pause, a swallowed sound, a tall thing in the lane. It stood very still. It turned its head. It looked toward the house, but then it was gone when I blinked. I don't want anyone at my door. I don't want to talk. I just wanted you to know." The line ended with static, like a stone dropped into a well. The reporter listened twice and then 3 times. He forwarded the file to the amateur group. They ran the recording through filters. There was the hum, an almost undetectable low band that matched a spike in one of the porch camera audios. The waveform was not a proof so much as a thread. Whoever left the message asked for nothing and offered nothing more. That reticence, more than any waveform, altered the scene.
Inisi, more than any waveform, altered the scene. It added a human reluctance to the documentary record. People who had seen something, and who, for reasons private and personal, did not want their observations turned into spectacle. The clips continued to move between hands, analysts and onlookers, the curious and the cautious. Each person who opened the folder made a choice: to annotate, to withhold, to publish, to forget. In a town whose nights had begun to feel porous, those choices multiplied into a social habit. People lit candles where no event had occurred, checked locks twice, sat awake in shifts. The ordinary thinned, as if under constant micro-exposure, and objects in its midst gained the capacity to startle. Late one evening, a young member of the amateur group sat alone at his desk with 3 screens open and a pile of notes. He had been mapping the times, the surge at 2:16 a.m., the field image from the dashcam, the voicemail. He panned frames, comparing line noise and pixel patterns, until shapes that had looked like accidents began to repeat with a specificity he could not yet name. Then his phone chimed, an email with a single attachment labeled only with a date from 2 years prior. He clicked it, and the video opened. At first it was a backyard, rain on plastic, the familiar. Then the light pulsed, slow, measured, and at the edge of the frame something like a shadow straightened itself and faced the lens. He leaned closer, not because he expected an answer, but because curiosity had become a force that demanded to be answered. The screen filled his field of vision. The object held its posture. There was no flourish, no revelation, only an orientation toward the camera, a brief, near imperceptible tilt as if acknowledging its own recordedness, and then the rain resumed its ordinary punctuation. He rewound, played the frames at 1/4 speed, then at 1/1000th. The tilt was there each time, consistent, patient. He sat back and turned the lights off. The screens glowed like windows. Outside, the town breathed. Inside, the folders waited. Some things in the world insist on remaining undecided. The footage persisted in that state, rarely decisive, often suggestive, pulling witnesses into a kind of shared suspense. People would open their doors at night now with a slowness that felt like respect, as if the ordinary could be interrupted not by spectacle, but by a small, patient attentiveness. The files, the calls, the vigil notes, all accumulated in an archive that was itself a witness, messy, partial, human. He saved the clip into a new folder labeled simply Edges. And then he opened another message from a number he did not recognize. The text was brief, a photograph attached, taken at dawn. In the image, the lane was empty, except for a smear where dew had not settled, a narrow trench in the sod, like a fingernail dragged through velvet. There was no sign of the vertical shape now.